Is liberty dying where you live? Escape to Keene at freekeene.com.
If you got any questions, come see me, and I'm going to introduce Eric Freerock. He is going to be introducing the remainder of his wonderful panel here. Eric Freerock is one of the key cop blockers in the area. He was the host of Cop Block Radio for a long time, and he is now going to be handling this panel and brings a lot of media expertise to the table as well. He's been producing a bunch of media stuff online for Cop Block and for some other purposes as well. So great activist here in the Keene area, and actually a mover from the Free State Project who is from New Hampshire. So he was born in New Hampshire, left New Hampshire, and then signed up for the Free State Project and moved back to New Hampshire. So it's fairly rare to run across somebody like that. So thanks, Eric, for being here, and thank you guys as well, and thanks for coming back from lunch. So Cop Block panel for the first time ever.
All right, cool. Yeah, so I'm actually from Keene, so I left and then came back, so I guess it works out. I'm technically a Free Stater, but whatever. If you have
Free Stater,
yeah, I guess
Restater,
re-entry, yeah, Restater. Yeah, that's a good one, I guess. If you have any questions, let's come up to the mic right in the middle. We're not, whatever. I guess we'll just start off with introducing yourself and how you got started in the Cop Block, and I guess we'll start at the end.
All right. Hey, well, I'm Joël Valenzuela. I moved last year to Manchester, and that was kind of the start of my big cop blocking experience. There's a very strong cop block presence out in Manchester, and there's a lot of, Manch PD is pretty big, there's a lot of action going on, and so I would start getting involved, especially at the suspicionless checkpoints that they kept holding. And so far, I mean, there's not very many places that can compete with Manchester in terms of a cop blocking presence at large events like that. We've had people from all the way over from here, from Keene, come out and help us. Also, I have spoken at student groups around the country on the subject of cop block, and it's always a easier hit with the kids. And also, I write online for things like the Free Thought Project on the subject a lot.
I'm Centurion. I go by JP. I moved to New Hampshire in 2006. How I got into Cop Block was the Keene police raided the wrong house. I was there with my current girlfriend that went to Keene State College. That's what brought me up here. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. And they raided the house and beat me up, and we started this big Fed lawsuit against them because they were serving a federal warrant out of jurisdiction. And make a long story short, during that process, I think it lasted like 4 or 5 years, something like that. One of the depositions coming out of the Superior Court, there was some thing going on downtown with the Free Keene. I knew nothing about libertarian, Free State, nothing. I didn't know anything about anything. And I met Pete there downtown, and one night he invited me to the CAC, and I've basically been doing it ever since.
And yeah, my name's Eric, and it's really weird how I got into Cop Block. I guess mostly it's from seeing videos from various Free Staters and then like open carry advocates and whatnot, and that kind of led me over to a lot of the Cop Block videos. And this was while I was still living in Columbus, Ohio, and being in New Hampshire is so much better than being in Columbus, because even though there's way less people here, there are a lot more liberty-minded individuals and active people who involve themselves in Cop Block. I was in Columbus when Pete Air came through during the 2012 police accountability tour that he did prior to Liberty Forum that year. And of the 25 people who said that they were going to show up to the meeting, I was the only one who showed up. And this is Columbus, and there's 1.2 million people within a 10-mile radius of where the meeting location was, but I was the only person to show up, which was kind of nice for me because I got to talk to Pete for 2 hours, and we talked about various things of things in New Hampshire, and then what was going on with Cop Block, and then I had an idea of doing the Cop Block, doing a podcast dedicated to just Cop Block related stuff. And at that point, I think the Cop Block Facebook page was maybe at about 30,000 likes at that point. So we were the first game in town as far as like a dedicated show. It was 2 hours every week dedicated to police accountability issues. And now I think there's at least 5 shows that do that on a weekly basis now. And now the greatest thing that we've seen from that time when I started at the 35,000 mark is now we're almost to 1.3 million likes on the Cop Block Facebook page, which is insane. And we're now getting like weekly, we're getting more likes per week.
Past P1.
What?
Blew past P1.
Yeah, Police 1, yeah, we kind of massacred them. I think only the Cops TV show has more likes than the Cop Block Facebook page does as far as a cop-related Facebook page. So that's where we are for now, I guess.
Well, when I started Cop Blocking with you a year or so ago, I think I was doing Thursday, Friday, and Saturdays from 3 p.m. I usually do outreach with the college kids for hours, and getting to know them, letting them know their rights, what to say, what not to say, like coaching them. And I think 3 a.m. we usually cut out, 3 a.m. in the morning. So we were doing that about 10 weeks straight. So the cops here hated us. Dropped the number of fines in open container, and them going after victimless crimes down huge. So we have a pretty big, I kind of stay in the college area, so I'm kind of a little celebrity there. They love seeing me.
It's hilarious, especially with this guy. He's like, we're just like going down the street on like a bike or something, and they're like, JP. He's like taking pictures with like 20 girls. 20 girls.
Living the dream right there.
It was hilarious. It's pretty funny.
It's still. It just hasn't stopped. Yeah, I went out last night. I think I ended 2:45. It was kind of homeless for the night because I was supposed to stay with James Cleveland for Robin Hood, and I kind of had a couch hop last night, so because of Cop Blocking. But we do pretty big here.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how you have this celebrity status with the college kids, with the younger generations, and then you go in the older conservative groups, and they just what do you have against law and order? And
yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's just completely different response. And I think that it's probably because young people have grown up in this sort of police state, and the older generations didn't quite have the same experience, and so they're kind of in denial at how bad it's gotten. And so that's the big challenge, is to convince the older generations, a lot of whom make up the voters, right, that it's not Mayberry anymore. It's more like Fallujah.
Well, when I interact with the college kids, I mean, some of these combos go for an hour and 45 minutes, and I'm new. I'm fairly new because during the Cop Block thing, I'm grasping like Eric always told me. He's like, "What do you believe in? What's this? What's that?" And now I'll tell him, he goes, "You're an anarchist." That's exactly what we do. That's how we think. And I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. And I went through the whole Fed thing and being accused of a Fed and all that stuff, but I still pressed on and just did my activism.
It's a rite
anyway.
of passage in this community.
Yeah, I heard. But afterwards, I really started getting involved with the people at the Keene Activist Center, and I kind of and then they start to get to know me, and they forgot all about that, and I'm still doing it.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting evolution with you, because the first day that I met you, I hated you. I didn't like you at all. We were out cop blocking with Pete and Paul and one other person, and I couldn't stand you.
Dave Crawford.
David, yeah. But it's been a very interesting evolution with this guy. So, does Manchester use any literature? Because I know we do.
We usually, whenever I come to Keene, I get big stacks of stuff and just take them back there. So yes, we do have literature, not necessarily our own, but it gets passed out. And that, in fact, that was the only time during cop blocking the cops actually tried to arrest me, is when I was handing out literature.
It's amazing how much literature we pass out. I mean, we're talking in the thousands. And when I mention that number over the air, somebody's like, no way. You know, they're like, no way. Then they realize, yeah, you know, we're passing out 2,500 a night, you know, on a good night.
We bought 5,000 cards. It was Know Your Rights cards or warning cards or whatever. But what we did, we customized the one that was originally on the Cop Block website. So we made it specific to Keene. So we put, the Keene Cop Block, the Keene Cop Block website on there, and then on the back we put 2 QR codes. I think one was straight to the Keene scanner, and the other
Keene
one,
Cop Block Raw, right?
Yeah, well, no, the other one was to on Keene Cop Block. We actually have photos of all the police
employees.
So you can actually go on there. If you didn't know the person's name, you could check the photos and be like, "Hey, that's this guy."
We got their emails and their extensions.
Their phone numbers and all that fun stuff. So that's what we did to the literature that was already out there. We customized it specifically for this area. And I think we had to customize a couple little points on it because it didn't apply, or there was a caveat in New Hampshire that we had to specify, because the card pretty much covered the entire country, but there was one little caveat that we had to add on to on that. But yeah, I think at the beginning of last, I guess you can say at cop blocking season, because it's kind of when the college kids
we didn't have enough.
Right, we had just what was left at the CAC was maybe 500 or whatever, and then we put in an order for 5,000, and we've gone through those, and I think we're on another.
We're on the second 5,000 box. Yeah, we're looking at 10,000 in 2 years almost.
So I think that's something really important to utilize is literature and trying to customize it to your specific area, not being so broad, I guess. Like the literature that's already on the Cop Block website is useful, and then you can just take it and edit it down to specifically your needs. And I think that's really helped because you can get the word out and it's more specific to your area than, because it's going to be a little different between here and New Mexico or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know how it is in Manchester, because I've only done one DUI checkpoint in Manchester, but in here, if you get in convos with a cop here, I did a cop block meetup in Ohio. I did Columbus, Ohio cop block, and I also went with Dio to do Cleveland cop block. That was a long drive. I'm going to be doing Burlington, Vermont in a month, setting up a new chapter there with a guy named Samuel. But these meetups are important. But if you talk to a cop in all these places, they think alike, they act alike, and their goal is exactly the same no matter where you go. It's just oppressive, revenue driven, totally, like everywhere.
Yeah, that's difficult. I know in Manchester we've done quite a few police outreach things where we go to, for example, every once in a while at a McDonald's they have like a coffee with a cop thing where you're supposed to like show up and like ask them questions and things like that. And there's some other open events with the police, and there have been several cop blockers that show up there, and just trying to get involved with the police community and sort of strengthen ties there, which is kind of odd.
It is difficult. I can't have a good conversation with one for more than 5 minutes. I get aggravated with it.
Exactly. Well, there are a lot of people who join the police force who do care about the Constitution and things like that generically. I mean, but the problem with when you're trying to start these conversations is a lot of times what you end up telling them is every single thing that they're paid to do is just no good for society. And eventually it's like, you can't tell them, well, why don't you respect rights a little bit more here or there? It's like, how hard it is to be like an Oath Keeper cop? And I mean, that doesn't stop me from going to the Manch PD and filling up their little pamphlet shelves with Oath Keeper lit all the time. But I mean, what are they going to do? Just stop doing the job that they're paid to do because it violates our rights? It's kind of it's easier to outreach to ex-cops than it is to current cops.
Well, I noticed it, if they have a training officer and all of a sudden he's by himself for the first time since he's been there, you can have a decent conversation with him for an hour Wait 6 months after that, and you can see the evolution change in his brain. And they're totally different from the first time you talk to them when they first started on the force. It's amazing.
Get them while they're young.
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing, you just mentioned Oath Keepers. I believe a few days ago, the main Facebook page for Oath Keepers totally trashed on Cop Block. It was kind of funny.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that push and pull. Although, I mean, my point of view is if the Oath Keepers were in control, so to speak, there wouldn't be a cop block. You know, it's just from police screwing up and trampling all over the rights. Now, I'm not defending everything that law enforcement's allowed to do by the Constitution.
Because some of that ain't so great either.
Yeah, some of that ain't so great either, but if they did stick to that, there probably wouldn't be a cop block. Like, they wouldn't be bad enough so people actually cared to spend a lot of time, effort, money, and personal risk to fight the police state if it wasn't so bad. And so, I mean, that's the constant challenge when you're trying to outreach to groups who are, you know, sort of trying to tone down police abuse, but you're coming from a completely they're all bad kind of perspective. It's really hard to like try to find common ground. And sometimes, like, when I see a lot of stuff going, like, if you read a lot of stuff that like Cop Block puts out, it's pretty deep stuff. Like, it's pretty hardcore. You have to be ready to be able to stomach some of that. I mean, sometimes I have a lot of friends on the right, on the conservative side, and they're all for rights and Constitution and things like that. And then they like the Cop Block page on my suggestion, and then after a while they just like, what's wrong with these guys? Oh, they hate America or something? And it's like, no, dude, you haven't been in here long enough. You just give it time. You're going to start, you know, your objections to stuff are going to go down and down and down when you just realize, you know. And also, I mean, whenever they're pulled over by a law enforcement agent, is ever trying to comply or give them any ground? It's always the opposite. It's always trying to say, how can I get out of this fine? How can I get them to leave me alone? How can I just not cooperate in any way and get away with it? That's kind of, even regular people, so to speak, have that mindset. It's like, oh gosh, it's the cops, they're coming after me, just get them away.
I had a conversation sort of like that with a college kid one night. He's a criminal law and justice major, and he said, I'm not afraid of the cops. I think they're awesome, blah, 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 blah. And I asked him, I'm like, be honest, please be honest with me. When you see a cop behind you and you're doing 5 miles over the speed limit, what are you thinking? He says, I get nervous. I'm like, see, you shouldn't be nervous. Why should you be nervous? He's afraid of him. In the back of his mind, he knows something bad's going to happen to him. I'm like, that's exactly how you're not supposed to think.
Yeah, and I mean, my great-grandmother ran a restaurant in Philadelphia, and she used to always offer cop discounts and always have cops around, things like that, because that would make it easier to actually keep her place secure, because there would be always cops around and be harder to rob, etc. And now, can you imagine trying that today?
It's like paying off the mob.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, hey, not that there's anything wrong with that, but you know, now imagine that today. You welcome, oh hey, friendly neighborhood officer, come into my home and, you know, maybe smell weed somewhere, and then I'm screwed. You know, I mean, it's like you can't, especially like post-drug war, you can't really, you don't want to deal with the cops on a personal, jovial kind of basis.
The fake drug war.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the war on us. We'll call it that instead.
The war on us.
I forgot where I was going to go with that. So, why don't you tell us some of like your most memorable experiences that you've had? Because you guys have had, especially in Manchester, has had the massive checkpoint.
Oh yeah.
Groups.
A couple of these have been like 50 or so people out there cop blocking in one spot.
When I went out, there was at least 40.
Yeah, it was a huge group, and part of the thing that I like to do, because usually the street corners are well enough staffed with people holding signs diverting traffic away from the checkpoints, warning them. And so usually if it's well staffed enough, I'll go out with a couple other people. We'll hit all the bars and talk to all the bartenders and say, hey, just so you know, there's a checkpoint on Bridge Street. Tell your patrons they might give you an extra tip. And just keep on going, hitting all the bars like that. And then on one of those times, one of the bar patrons was like, oh yeah, they're doing that. Like, half of Manchester's out there protesting the cops right now. I'm like, sweet, that was one big memorable thing, was just the people see that it's like half of, it's a huge movement. And we have about a 98% or so positive response rate from those checkpoints. There's always the one or two grumpy old guy who's like, oh, get a job, or, do you want people to die drunk driving? Or there's always a couple, but far and wide, everyone's just like, you guys are heroes. There's people like trying to throw money at us, trying to give us free pizza, high fives, fist, like all the time. And so it's an interesting environment, because like the cops are just sort of on the defensive. They're just sort of sitting there quietly trudging on with their job, and then it's like we own the night kind of thing.
Right. And for all the people who are watching at home, if you have ever been to a checkpoint protest and you didn't have 40 people, you probably are not living in New
or
Hampshire.
driving through
Exactly.
one without a camera when you run a Cop Block radio show.
I'm gonna smack you.
Yeah.
That's a long story. I think I talked about that last year.
That's
you can go to
that's
last
a
year's.
memorable moment.
That was a memorable
That's a
moment.
memorable. Why don't you talk about that?
Oh.
It's a good lesson.
All right. So
Yeah. The memorable part was, this is kind of a recent
get it,
thing
Graham.
that we've managed to get the whole checkpoint activism to such a high level, because when my first time I was starting, we had a pretty good turnout, like 20, 30 people maybe, and maybe about 20. And so we got at some stoplight, some person was honking, hey, I love what you guys are doing. I really love what you guys are doing. Where can I find out more? So I walked into the crosswalk, which, by the way, the walk signal was on at the time, and passed her out a little cop block thing. And as soon as I got back to the sidewalk, two cops converged on me and tried to arrest me for jaywalking. You could tell they were just like waiting for an excuse to shut someone down and intimidate us. Unfortunately, it was all on camera, and so by several cameras. And at the end, they just gave up. And I remember they were sitting there nervously twitching on their radios, and they said, what do we do, over? And finally they just said, let you off the warning, and just like took off. They mumbled something, and they haven't tried anything since, because they know now.
who gets jaywalking tickets?
Apparently people trying to stand up for other rights. They'll
Wow.
get, just like the whole Al Capone tax evasion thing, they'll get you for whatever they can, even if it's not what they really want you for.
It's bullcrap. My memorable moment probably is the whole one of the cops here used to be the lacrosse team coach for Keene State College, but also is a cop on a bike in the same area with all of his students. One of his students came up to me and punched me numerous times, and both of us, he had a view on his camera and I had a view on mine, while he was sitting there watching it happen. Didn't do a thing. That was the most memorable moment. After that, there was a 7-minute video of me chasing him on his 7-minute video. It's on Keene Cop Block Raw. I was chasing him for 7 minutes straight, heckling the crap out of him. You're a lacrosse team coach, you're a conflict of interest, you're a coward. You're a coward, acting upon an assault on your own lacrosse teammate.
I'm surprised
straight.
I
It
did
sounds
not
like, yeah,
hurt
have a good
myself
time.
that night, because I was behind him giggling so much. I could barely control my bike. I thought I was going to wreck it at some point.
Ian Freeman was there that night. He was right next to me watching me heckle him for 7 minutes straight. I don't know.
It was funny.
It was a 3,000 something views on that video. It was weird.
It was good.
But that's probably the most memorable moment. He got let go because I filed numerous complaints with the college. That's a conflict of interest, and through the NCAA, I wanted him out of there. So he's no longer an employee for the Keene State College, but he's still on the bike and passing out victimless crime for revenue purposes on the kids.
I can't win them all, huh?
No, but I do want to say, since Chris Cantwell came up, I was by myself a few weeks back, and it was it was a busy night. I think it was a Friday night. I'm getting surrounded by cops. It's like parties like every 5 feet, and I'm by myself. I'm like trying to get this stop and that stop, them going to this house. So I made a distress call, and twice already, he's the first one that came out to back me up.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody's talked about it yet, but in Keene we use the two-way radios, and I got to say that of all the activism I've been involved in, I think that that's like the greatest thing that we've got going on here in Keene is that there's the radio repeater at someone's house somewhere, and it makes it so easy for us to communicate in real time. And since Keene is sort of a small town, there's a whole lot going on in a really generally small vicinity. So while on occasion, personally, I might not want to, run around with a camera and film everybody who gets a drinking in public ticket, when there is a distress call, you get on the radio and people just come running pretty quickly. I have radio, I keep the radio on me at all times, and I also have radios on chargers on every floor of my house so that, whenever anything's going on, I'm able to respond to it.
Yeah, it could be 2 a.m. It could be 2 a.m. and the only one that responds is Chris.
Yeah, well, that's the one thing that the Manch activists seem to be lacking in. There's not a lot of radios around. So far, the only people that I know that have radios are myself and Rob Mathias. And I make sure to buy. I bought like 3 of them off Pete Air. And so
I got 5. I got 5 of them in case some people want to help us. I got 5.
Yeah, well, we can't all be that special, I'm trying. I'm just trying to break in and just trying to get a new way of doing things, because sometimes during these whole cop block things, I've had to physically run down to different spots of the operation to convey messages or call people and hope that they can respond. But it's like there's got to be a better way.
Yeah, I think that's one problem that we had run into when we were up at the checkpoint in Walpole, is that the range isn't so great. So if you're trying to go radio to radio, you can't get that far. So I think that's one thing that needs to be solved, is like a portable friggin' repeater or something. I don't know.
Well, that was a memorable moment because that was my first checkpoint that I ever did, and I think a lot to do with that whole situation with you driving through there and getting arrested. It was because of the radio mess up, and too many people were on it. Too many people were going over people and talking over, instead of talking about specific people at the checkpoint. They were talking about other things, and it was kind of like a hectic night. But I didn't even know you were going through, and then I'm waiting. I'm like, are we going home soon? And then it's like, he got arrested. I'm like, how long ago was that? That was 2.5 hours ago. You didn't see it? No, I was standing right here. I didn't see Eric get arrested. Where the heck did that happen? So it was kind of a hectic night.
Yeah, I think it was lucky that I had, I don't know whose number I had on my phone. I think I only had one person's number in my phone, and I luckily called them, and they were out there with me, so they could pick me up from.
Oh, your wife wasn't happy.
That happens.
When she bailed you out, I'm like, I'm not worried about the cops. Is he coming back? I thought you were gonna go missing.
I heard you'd mentioned. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you mentioned the lack of phone numbers in your phone. I found very useful. I have the I'm Getting Arrested app on my phone, which is a thing that you hit a shortcut and it'll actually send out a mass text message. You have to put the numbers in ahead of time, so it assists to have some foresight. I know that in Keene we have Keene 411. I don't know if such a thing exists in Manchester or if it's widely used, but we use the Keene 411, so that's one of the numbers that it goes out to. If I hit this thing, it's going to notify my family, it's going to notify my friends up here, it's going to notify media figures in other states, it's going to notify Keene 411. It's a great app to use.
I have a good story about that. When I first met Pete Air and he invited me to the KAC, I was just getting out of a paintball game. So me and my buddy wearing like fatigues, and I don't know nothing about the paranoia of Free Staters or anything. So I look like I just got out of Baghdad. And I'm meeting Pete, and he's like, "Oh, come over to the Shire Free Church and meet us. I got some pizza or whatever." We go there. There was a girl named Ellen Ball on the porch. I'm like, "Is Pete there yet?" She ran. She's like, "I gotta go." She goes, runs into the Free State, the LRNFM side, slams the door, and literally, I'm not kidding you. I am not kidding you. I don't know nobody. 5 seconds. 8 cars pull up. People are pouring out of the doors. They're like, what's going on? They have cameras. They got their phones out. I mean, their response time beat beat KPD's at least by 2.5 minutes. They showed up at their house with like 20 vehicles, all kinds. Where's the National Guard? They're storming the KAC. They're storming and they all used Keene 411 for that. That was amazing. It scared the crap out of me.
Yeah, between the radios and Keene 411, I mean, there's just such rapid communication between Keene activists that I mean that's an excellent thing for Cop Block or anything else. And I mean, especially if we're over by the Keene Activist Center, a supporter of mine bought the house across the street from there, and so now we've got 2 activist houses directly across the street from one another. I'm going to be leaving that house, and I'm hoping to get a house right around the corner so that we can begin occupying more territory in the neighborhood, so that you actually have more activists geographically concentrated, which is sort of the whole point of the Free State Project to begin with. And then when you have activists geographically concentrated in one city or in one neighborhood, I mean, it just creates such a rapid response time that if anything is going on, whether it's a cop block thing or something else, people just show up real fast.
Yeah, so far with the Manchester community, they tend to be bootstrapping it through Facebook. Like someone gets pulled over, someone puts out a message. In some cases, it works really well. For example,
when they show up, do they scare the crap out of you?
Well, no, because you already know who's going to be coming. But like when Riaz got pulled over at the bottom of the hill, right next to the Quill, within about 5 minutes of posting a Facebook message, there was a dozen porcupines just came charging down the hill like in Braveheart, phones in hand, and more people were, there was a few people open carrying, so there's more guns on the scene there than represented by Manch PD, which is kind of a fun little.
It's a massive turnaround when you see a cop react without video. And when they're on video, it's it's a total night and day.
I think that's actually one of my favorite stories is when I believe it was the first night that just you and I went out cop blocking, and we were on Main Street, and there was a guy who was
they just took his keys.
They just took his keys. Well, so basically
they were gonna arrest him.
Right, there was a guy who was drunk, and he was by his car. And like we could see it from across the street what was kind of going on. It looked like eventually he was going to get arrested and PC'd, probably protective custody. And we show up and the two of us are filming, and the conversation like totally went 180. Instead of arresting this guy and putting him in the drunk tank for a while, all they did was take his keys. They said, "Here,
let him sleep it off.
We're going to take your keys. Go ahead, sleep it off in the car. We'll come back in 3 hours with your keys, and then you can be on your way." So it was
Officer Colin Zamor did.
Yeah, that was a much more favorable outcome to that than being stuck in the drunk tank and probably having his car towed as well, because it's after it was late, and on Main Street you're not allowed to park on Main Street after so many whatever. And then I think it was a few weeks later, we almost had the same thing happen, was that there was the apartment building or the office building outside, and there was a guy who was drunk behind the dumpster or something.
Oh, yeah.
And like over the radio, we hear, they're going to protective custody and whatnot, and we show up, and then they decide, we'll just drop him off at his friend's house.
Yeah.
So they found somewhere to drop him off instead of putting him in the drunk. I think that's a much better service, if they were actually going to provide a service, is to get somebody home safely instead of just sticking them in a jail cell somewhere.
When I first started cop blocking with you, especially the first night Pete Air came out, you guys were amazed on the interaction, on how they respond to me. Because you didn't know my previous existing relationship with KPD. They don't want nothing to do with me. I could swear at them, yell at them. They have this block wall, and then I don't want nothing to do with it.
Yeah, a lot of them, that's one thing I've noticed here is different from other videos I've seen online from other places, is that here a lot of the cop blockers can get way closer to the cops than you can elsewhere.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that in Cleveland. No way.
I have seen, people getting written up for open container, and there is a cop blocker 5 feet away. 5 feet away from the cop filming the whole thing. I'm like, wow, that is way close compared to what I've seen. Cops have gone nuts for 30 feet away, and then these people are 5 feet away and nothing happening. And they're talking to the cop the whole time. Like, are you proud of yourself, what you're doing? Look, you're making this girl cry. And the cop
how do you look at yourself in the mirror?
Doesn't even glance over, doesn't make any eye contact, doesn't acknowledge that the person is there.
Where's the victim?
Right. It's really interesting, the dynamic between the cops here and cop blockers versus elsewhere around the country.
What I've noticed with cop blocking, and even just having the cop block bumper sticker on the car, I had originally going into it thought that I would gain more unwanted attention from law enforcement, that they'd harass me more and stuff like that. What I found is like the exact opposite. These guys don't want to be the next big YouTube star for all the wrong reasons.
It's true. They
know who Cop Block is. Even when I was doing it in Suffolk County, where the police are not known to be friendly, peaceful people, they actually got trained. They knew exactly who I was. As soon as we got started cop blocking, it was just me and a buddy. We had a very popular video, it was hundreds of thousands of hits on us cop blocking a checkpoint in Suffolk County, New York, and Long Island. And was
that the one you were on, kind of the side of the highway?
Yeah,
that was a good one. That's a good video.
Right.
Was that the seatbelt checkpoint?
Yeah, it was a seatbelt checkpoint.
I love that video.
A fun little aside is I'm trying to tell people to put their seatbelts on, and a lot of people mistook it for a obscene gesture, and so I think that might have been part of what played into the popularity of the video. But it was a blast, and I mean, like, and that was actually like the first time I made any money off of YouTube too, as an aside, and that got the attention of the Suffolk County Police Department. And then when we started going out with our cameras, even outside of the jurisdiction where we were, there's the entire Suffolk County Police Department. I believe we were in 5th precinct when that happened. Even when we were in 6th or 4th precinct or whatever, different police departments already knew who we were. There's another video. I said, "Meet my biggest fan," and the guy was talking about my history with the Libertarian Party and all of this, knew exactly who I was and did not want to screw around with us. So I think that there's a certain, some people might have a certain aversion to getting involved in cop blocking because they fear that, the police are going to give them a harder time. What I've found is it's the exact opposite.
Well, you're not going to see me go up to like a Brooklyn cop with
yeah.
Where's the victim? Yeah, you'll find me in an alleyway.
At least not anytime soon.
No. Well, when I went to Cleveland, I definitely kept my distance. I was just videoing. I was not heckling them.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see how the police departments get trained to, through trial and error, that some people just aren't worth dealing with. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're on camera a lot of the time. And that has to do with technology. Now, there's always new and better ways.
The cases definitely help too. The Click case, the Carla Ware thing. I mean, I think New Hampshire is. I mean, me looking from the outside in, not being a free stater, coming into the movement and gaining all the ideas and getting to know people and getting into the movement. It's amazing the difference between New Hampshire and other states, because you guys, I'm not trying to collectivize, but, for the majority of the people that have been videotaping police for a long time, for the Free Staters, Free Keene and stuff like that, it kind of prepared the cops for the next generation of videographers.
Exactly. And recently we started debuting a drone to film the police, an aerial drone with a GoPro. Like the last checkpoint that we had in Manchester was we sent a drone up in the sky to film the checkpoint. And then during Pumpkinfest, when there was the rooftop scouters / snipers, we also sent the drone up there and got some aerial footage of the police presence on the rooftops. Now, we have yet to have any problems yet, but I'm sure that once cop blockers start,
they probably think it's theirs.
Well, we did see theirs too.
Oh, that's one of us.
Yeah, we did see theirs too. It's a different color, etc. But we have yet to have problems with it. But that might happen once cop blockers start using more and more radical technology out there, and there might be more crackdowns. For example, the challenge with doing stuff in Manchester is the airport. And according to the FAA, within 5 miles of the airport, you have to notify air traffic control. Which one thing means that might be a pretext to get them to take your drone out, or it also means you could be. I would just love to be there when that first call's made, when someone's notifying air traffic control that they're going to be cop blocking with the drone up there. Just so you know, air traffic control, there's going to be this little drone buzzing, filming these cops. I just can't wait for that to happen.
Yeah, the whole it's really sticky when it comes to drones in some places. Like if you're under 200 feet, then you don't need FAA clearance to do anything. And then there's a guy out in California named Tom Zebra. His videos are hilarious, and he has his favorite catchphrase is "You're mistaken, bacon," and that's probably one of the funniest catchphrases. And he was flying a drone over a police station parking lot that was completely gated off. And they were trying to charge him with trespassing because his drone was over the gate. But it's like,
but he didn't go.
He didn't go in, and you can't trespass somebody from the airspace over, because he never touched the ground on the other side, so they can't get him anything for that.
That's why I don't read stories. My blood pressure is.
But then, unfortunately, he was at another location where he has since got his drone taken, because it's kind of like wherever you take off and land is kind of the place you have to be careful of.
Exactly.
And now,
freedom of speech zone.
Right. Now, apparently, you can't fly drones in national parks. It's like, well, technically you can, as long as you take off and land from outside the park, then you're okay.
Yeah, no, part of that, the whole challenge in doing that is not necessarily waiting for permission or waiting for authorities to catch on and try to stop you and react to that. Part of it is just trying to stay one step ahead of them. For example, when you send up a drone in the middle of Pumpkinfest, when there's thousands and thousands of people clogging the streets everywhere, it's like you have no idea where this thing comes from, who sent it up, anything. It just lost in the crowd, so to speak. You just just disappear back into the crowd with your drone, and then no one knows.
You should just put police on it.
Yeah, or do something like that too. Also, we've been experimenting a lot with
Cambridge police will arrest you for making your cop car as a Decepticon.
They just put Decepticon on the side. I don't know if anybody's seen that article where somebody got pulled over impersonating a police officer when he made his car look like a Transformers car, and it said Decepticons on the side. And he has since won that case.
Yeah, because it's ridiculous.
It was really ridiculous.
Well, yeah, I mean,
that's mass. You blink on Sunday at 3 p.m. you probably commit a felony.
Probably.
I mean, you could just be all cheeky about it and just say not a drone on it. And so as you're the other things, we've been experimenting a lot with autopilots and different things like that. So eventually it might be difficult for them to even ascertain whose drone it is, where it comes from. It starts in one place and lands in another, and then just makes a flyover, does some filming, keeps going, disappears behind a bush, and then someone who didn't make it take off goes and collects it, and then they just don't know.
Just put JP on it. Just put JP.
Yeah,
blame it on me.
Yeah, go hit him with a lamppost.
Well, all right, so
that leads to that story.
Yeah, let's go into that. We have
Nice
to talk
segue.
about Pumpkinfest. I was not there because I knew it was going to hit the fan most likely, so I didn't even bother. But this guy was there.
I was there in the beginning. I was there at 2 p.m. when there was some kid with blood streaming down his face walking by. I was there for the drone at 5, and then I took off before he had the real fun.
After meeting him on the porch, introduced each other. We're like, oh, we're on the Cop Block panel together. I'm like, oh, cool, how you doing? Get on my bike, I'm coming down. I cross Gilboa Ave, cross Emerald Street, and then I'm hearing a lot of people in glass. It's still light out. I'm going by one cop, I think it was Sergeant Simons in his riot gear, putting a kid on a board, ready to put him in an ambulance. He's got blood all over his face. I pass him behind Emerald Street, right where 87 Davis is. Davis goes like this, all college houses. And then you have Blake Street and Wilson all the way to Winchester Street, all college houses on both of those streets. So the whole entire block was cordoned off. You got riot police blocking both sides of Davis, one side of Blake, the other side of Blake, the other side of Wilson. And we're talking over 100 cops blocking. So I'm on private property. I put my bag down. I'm there 2 seconds. Okay, I got the last half of that on video on Keene Cop Block Raw. I pull out my camera. This guy comes up to me. He's when I'm on my knees, the guy looked like he was 6'8". So
You're not that tall to begin with.
Yeah, and I'm not that tall. So this is state cop, and he's not in riot gear. He's got his ranger hat on. He headbutts me. Bam! His rim falls off. I'm like, I'm dazed. He's like, you're an illegal, blah, 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 blah. I turn my camera on. I'm like, I just got assaulted by this state police officer. Right on camera, he turns around and goes, I should have effing punched you. There's bottles flying by his head. That's when I made a distress call. I just got headbutted by a cop. Who comes to my aid? The first person that comes to my aid, Chris Cantwell. He comes. I got this big knot on my head, and that's just the beginning. There's a distress call from Johnson Rice. I try to make my way. I'm getting yelled at the whole time. You can't come down here. So I'm cutting through houses, carrying my bike on my back, throwing them over fences. I cut over where Gilboa Ave goes around, and I try to go around to where the pub restaurant is. That's blocked off, so I kind of went behind there, made my way through about 2,000 kids yelling USA over and over and over. Make my way finally. Pepper spray thing goes right in front of me. Boom! I'm like, great, I can't breathe. I got my eyes are tearing up. I'm still trying to say I got my shirt over my face, like coughing like crazy. I'm making my way to Johnson, and finally I met up with him, and there's like kids everywhere. And on top of that, I'm having kids that notice me hugging me. Yo, I'm so glad you're here. They're all messed up. I got people making distress calls. I'm confused because I got headbutted. Next thing I know, bang, 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 bang. I get hit by pepper spray balls, but that wasn't until after he gave me a mini cam because my battery ran out on my camera. I'm calling Robin Hood of Keene's, James Cleveland, for an extra battery. He's like, you got 10 minutes. I'm like, I'm going to get killed before then. He grabs a little cam, lets me use the little cam, so I got some footage of that. Make my way back. Another pepper spray canister blows up right near us, so we had to move all the way back into the campus. Everybody disperses. Everybody comes back, well, 1,000 strong again, yelling USA, breaking, flipping over cars, smashing windows. Bottles are flying by they're still shooting those freaking paintball things. I got welts all over my back. Now, it's getting like, I'm making the story fast. I mean, this is a span of like 2-something hours or so. So we kept running back, coming back, moving back, coming back with the crowd and trying to videotape. Well, when people started moving, when the riot police started moving all the kids back, you can hear all the chatter of the other videographers. You can hear James like, they're back near everybody's yelling on the radio. Everybody's screaming. There's something going on everywhere. Next thing I know, I get a cop picking up my bike in full riot gear. It looked like a Ninja Turtle that just walked out of Fallujah. And he is revved the frig up. Get your fucking bike out of here now, blah, 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 blah. The crowd is way over there. I'm by myself. He drags me across the street, throws my bike on me, and then, believe it or not, a Keene cop came to my aid. It was, I think it was Todd Lawrence, actually, Lieutenant Lawrence. No, we know JP. He's not part of it. He's just one of the Free State weirdos or whatever. So they let me go. I go across to try to get some kids smashing this big, gigantic lamppost, and then more riot police got my attention. I turn around towards them. They're like, you need to get out of here. There's a helicopter, literally not even 100 feet above us, yelling on the loudspeaker, please disperse right now. You're in a legal assembly. You will be arrested, blah, 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 blah. It literally felt like a war zone. And then while I'm concentrating on them, they started walking away. Some kids are still breaking things. This full-size lamppost hits me in the back of the head, knocks me right off my bike. I'm laying there. And got a severe concussion, headbutt, bunch of welts on my back. Somebody from FSP, a friend of ours, brought me to the ER the next day, and I was throwing up all night because of the concussion. I never want to go to a Pumpkinfest ever again.
So basically what you're trying to come...
I'd rather deal with the snipers.
Basically what you're trying to say is you had a good time. No, I didn't have a very good time.
It occurs to me that there's another microphone up there, and if we all pass one down, that we can all have a microphone? Oh, that microphone sucks? Is that the...
No, the Pumpkinfest. I'm still on the Pumpkinfest.
I'm with
PTSD.
As JP mentioned, I was also at the riots at KSC, and I was actually live streaming. What's that? KSC, not KAC. KSC, I thought I said that. Okay. So Keene State College, and I had gone there in the afternoon. I just saw a Facebook post that there were supposedly like riots at Keene State College, and I had gone down there with Johnson and Danica, and we met up with Ian there, and it appeared to me at the time, this is at like 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, that whatever was going on had abated, that it wasn't that big of a deal. The police were blocking off one street and apparently just trying to contain some rowdy parties or something. And then I hear about JP in Static up there later on, and we go up there, and things got considerably worse. And I got to say, it was like the craziest thing that I've ever been involved in, and I've been involved in some pretty crazy shit. I mean, I was at Zuccotti Park and Occupy Wall Street and all these different things, but the ironic thing for me is that I went down there to film the police, and I ended up being more afraid of the I almost said protesters, but that's not what they were. They really were rioting. They started flipping cars over and stuff like that.
There was a Ferguson blogger from Ferguson that said those white hicks in New Hampshire showed everybody in Ferguson up.
Well, wow, that was.
And that's saying a lot.
I thought it was really entertaining. The next day, I was looking on Twitter. Hashtag Pumpkinfest was the #2 trend on Twitter the day after the riots, and it was hysterical to me that the liberal media tried to make this all about race, about like privileged white kids as opposed to the kids in Ferguson, that that they were just dismissed as some rowdy party. And I'm like, no, they had tear gas and armored personnel carriers. It was a pretty serious situation.
They were flipping cars over.
And what's hilarious to me is that if you look at some of the like Free State Project, Cop Block, Free Keene haters, they're trying to pin the riots to us. And in fact, when we started seeing people damaging private property and stuff, of course, we went down there to film police because, hey, if there's, riots, you can imagine that police are going to get pretty heavy-handed, and that's something that you want to get on video. But what ended up happening was, when the rioters started flipping over cars and that sort of thing, we started filming them. And these guys at one point threatened Jason Rapture. They surrounded him. He's got footage of it. I don't think it's on YouTube yet, but it will be pretty soon. His camera does much better low light than mine. But I got to a point that these guys were realizing, hey, we're committing felonies, and these guys are filming us. I don't care if you're a cop or a regular person. If you're going out and damaging private property and harming people, I'm going to record you. And at one point, these guys, they chased out ABC 7 News. At one point, they started chanting, fuck the press.
That lady was running. She was running.
Scared the living hell out of me, because also my camera...
In her nice dress.
My camera phone that I'm doing Ustream on doesn't do very well in low light, so not only am I recording them, I'm shining a flashlight at these guys who are, roid heads who are flipping over vehicles. And... right about that time, Johnson tells me that he's going to get out of there. Now, what wasn't widely publicized was I never planned to be on campus. I always carry a gun. And so I have my revolver on my hip, and I had concealed it, and I have a license to do that. And so while we're on the campus and I'm realizing these guys could turn on me at any second, I'm like, I'm going to be in a situation where if 5, guys who just flipped over 2 tons of steel decide to jump on me, I might be in a situation where I might have to shoot somebody. And if I shoot somebody in this riot, it's not going to be a good situation. So I had originally asked Johnson to get rid of the gun, but the gun was loaded and he didn't have a license to do that, and I didn't think it would be a good idea to unload the weapon in front of a bunch of lunatics who might be from out of state, might never have seen a gun, and be like, hey, that looks like a fun toy to play with at the riot. And so we ended up getting out of there.
Yeah. Now...
Oh, that leads me to another question. I don't know. Do any of you guys regularly carry a gun? And if you go out cop blocking, do you carry it with you when you do that?
Definitely not going to carry one in the middle of that. I can tell you that right now.
Well, yeah, it's interesting to see how the demeanor changes, because one night there in Manchester, there was a heckler who was quite drunk and quite confrontational to the point where we thought he might become a physical threat. And so when I showed up, and he saw the gun on my hip, he was gone.
That's happened to me at Walmart too, where some guy was completely strung out, and I was standing behind him in line, and he was mouthing off, and then he just sees. Then he saw that I was carrying, and he just like shut up and.
Yeah. Speak softly, but carry a big piece.
I'm all for people carrying, but I don't like them. I don't like the cops having them. I just don't like them.
I don't. When I'm out cop blocking, no, I normally don't carry at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it's usually, it definitely puts a different spin on things. Some cases where there might be a confrontation or an arrest.
Especially when you have a 65, 70-year-old with bald gray hair without a shirt on, carrying a revolver, walking around with you that you don't even know. That was very strange.
The other problem in Keene, though, is that we're going to be close. We're going to be we might cut onto campus, and if you're carrying a firearm on campus, you might have some problems. And also, there's some schools nearby too, and that's too much of a hassle. Luckily, the middle school isn't down there anymore, but it's kind of, we might be crossing property where we might get in trouble if we're carrying.
Yeah, for me, it's been an interesting experience because, of course, when I'm cop blocking in New York, I just don't have the option of carrying at all, much less openly, you know. And to do it here, I mean, on one hand, I do find that the gun will very quickly de-escalate conflicts, that people will see the weapon and say, hey, you know, maybe I don't want to screw around with this guy. And on the other hand, of course, you know, you have to be a little bit more reserved. You can't be quite as confrontational when you're carrying a weapon as when you're disarmed, of course, because if a police officer feels like you're an armed threat, then you might not go home that night.
Well, I'm a huge person against the militarization of police. I just don't feel that I need to carry one when I'm going up against that. It's kind of like a, I don't know, double
when you're kind
standard.
of outgunned at that point.
Yeah,
if you were to get into a situation.
I don't think a 9mm is going to work with a SWAT team with 5.56 M4s.
Yeah, it definitely depends on the situation. If it's a high confrontation zone, I would never ever carry in that kind of thing. If it's just a simple, I'm about my business filming, or just holding a sign, or just something where there's probably not going to be any trouble or even interaction with the police. Then,
no, I don't want them to die. I don't want the cops to get killed or people shoot cops. I want them to be pizza delivery guys, be peaceful, and leave college girls alone when they're crying, and stop going into people's homes, stealing their property, and putting 9 stitches in their mouth and breaking my nose and shattering my eye socket and
headbutting you.
And headbutting me. I mean, yeah, that stuff needs to stop.
Really, like.
Or blowing babies' faces off with flash grenades.
Yeah, you got me there. Yeah, I don't want any of that either. And unfortunately, a lot of times when we're in a situation with police, we have to tone down our confrontational natures as much as we can.
Officer Matt Griffin, why didn't you just start a daycare center? Why did you have to do this job?
Yeah, I mean,
I'd like to.
Yeah, you know what? You'd have made it. You look at Thick Neck there. You would have made a great MMA fighter. Why don't you go there? It's all consensual. It's fine. No one else gets hurt other than one guy. Like, why don't you just do that instead? Offer alternatives. That's one thing I love about the Threat Management Center in Detroit, is that they're offering a real alternative. Like,
it's amazing. I love that idea. I love it.
That's the biggest thing I run into when there's people who are traditionally defending the role of the police. They're like, yeah, well, you hate cops, but then, what are you going to do when people are kicking down your door trying to steal your stuff or whatever? There's always they're like, yeah, well, you're complaining about cops, but you don't have a better idea. And it really helps to have that sort of, there is a better idea. There is a better idea. They don't need to be doing this. I'm not against.
It's basically a monopoly. In most towns and cities, you have to call them. You got no other choice. But when somebody comes and does something to me, I don't want to call them, because I'll take my chances with take my VC out, because I am not bringing that douchebag in my house with a badge.
And so offering those alternatives, even if they're conceptual
DVD
alternatives.
player.
You still have a VCR, I was going to say.
Yeah, I don't.
Here's $5. You can take the DVR. I'll pay you to take it away.
Use recycling collection surcharge right there. Just pay and be like.
Yeah, because I don't know anything about Bitcoin yet. Yeah, I'm still working on that.
Hey, well, you're in good company here. I mean, I'm pretty sure you can find anyone during the conference who can hook you up.
It's been explained to me 300,000 times, and I do not get it. I don't get it.
Do you have a smartphone?
If I can learn how to use it after having it for a year, you got to tell them.
We'll work on you.
I'm 1985.
JP's trading in gold and silver, not because he's an ideologue. He just hasn't figured out Federal Reserve notes yet.
How is this paper worth money, man?
I'm still working on getting out of 8-tracks.
Yeah, I got some seashells. Do you accept those?
So for the alternatives, and you brought up a good point. It's not necessarily that some sort of protection agency, like having a protection agency is probably a good thing. Just like, if the fire department wasn't funded by tax dollars, I would definitely have a subscription to a fire protection service because, if my house catches on fire, I want somebody to come put out said fire.
Get some burn insurance.
Right.
The people the people need it for it.
Well, before even that, if you think about a lot of things, take your car for example. If you have a loan on your car, they're going to require that you have car insurance. And same thing, like if you have insurance on your house, the insurance company is going to require you to have a fire protection service to even cover it. Same thing, like you get a discount if you have a fire extinguisher in your house and stuff like that. I mean, so it's not like that these services are, like if you defunded these services, that there wouldn't be the option to have this type of service available to you. And that's the same thing with cops, that I want to have. If I wasn't forced to pay for what I currently get, I would definitely have a subscription to some other service that would, drive by once in a while, make sure nobody's breaking my house when I'm not there, and come out should I need them.
The amount of laws that the legislature has put in place to protect these idiots is amazing. They're making it almost impossible to go after a particular officer, especially during my lawsuit against the PD. It was amazing on how many times their lawyers brought up qualified immunity. What qualifies them to have immunity? They busted my face open. They caused over $25,000 worth of damages, in hospital bills, and we had to move because they ended up coming, and stuff like that. And it's amazing. You just can't go after these people. You
right.
Can't.
That's also one problem too. Is a lot of people are like, well, I'm not doing anything wrong. It's not going to affect me. It's like, well, if you live
does.
Well, if you live in a town where a cop does something wrong, you are on the hook for the money because the cop isn't going to lose a single dime because he's not going to be personally responsible for his own actions. It's the town that's going to end up paying for it, and then which means if you own property in that town, you're going to be paying more taxes. So yes, you are affected by the bad cops in your town.
The conflict of interest too. I want to touch on that real quick. Because if I want to make a complaint, let's say against Officer Benjamin Nugent, his immediate supervisor is Sergeant Simons, okay? I have to go to Sergeant Simons. That's the policy here. If I go to Sergeant Simons and file a complaint on him, believe it or not, Sergeant Simons was the best man at Benjamin Nugent's wedding. And he said he can actually do that objectively.
Right. Why are complaints or anything investigated by their own people? It's ridiculous. Of course, they're going to find they did nothing wrong. I mean,
yeah, and that's the one thing.
Yeah, my cousin, twice removed, is making a complaint. They're throwing that thing away.
Exactly.
Now
that's one thing when people defend the premise of having a police force. It's like, yeah, I know these corrupt this. I understand abuse that, but we need cops. We need something. And what they're not saying we need the police force as it is. What they're saying is we need some kind of protection of some kind. And some communities and some pockets of community, unfortunately, mostly the wealthy, do have a lot of private security. You got a gated community. There's a guard at the gate. You got a nice nightclub. You got a bouncer or few. And there's people that just take care of the basic, make sure nothing bad happens. And no one ever complains. No one's ever like, oh, fuck the gate guard. You never see that going on because he actually does a good job.
He provides a legitimate service to the people who live there who want it.
And so if you start pointing out more and more that there's other solutions to this problem, that this heavily unionized, corrupt, very aggressive kind of force is not what solves the problem. And I think one thing that gets it across, sometimes in my off time I design t-shirts, and this one that I designed has like a riot cop on it. It says, we break you, you pay for it. And because that's what it ends up being a lot of times is, look, you're paying for these people who are just injuring you, they're hurting you, they're out to get you, and you're paying for it. Why don't you pay for a guy who's actually going to serve your interests?
Well, with this call center thing, and this is coming from somebody that's basically a newborn into
the threat management.
Yeah, the threat management. Yeah, there's enough. If there's enough people, I mean, I think Free Keene has the the groundwork set for actually to get it done. But I was just watching a video that I think Derek J was playing at the KAC, and I was watching these old videos, like just way before me, when Free Keene first started, and I'm seeing maybe 35 to 50 activists, and I don't see any of those people around now. And I keep asking her, where do these people go? Where are they going? Where are they going? Oh, they used to be involved. They used to be, and looking from the outside in, somebody that's, just coming in, I'm like, where are all these people? You have enough people right there to actually make one of those call centers, but they're all gone. I mean, how do we keep people,
They burn out.
Right,
It's an intense lifestyle we live right here.
Right, and that was actually one of my questions. How do you deal with burnout or not getting burned out? Because right now I'm super burned out. Like, I haven't been out cop blocking for almost a year now, and I haven't been doing the radio show for a couple months.
Exactly. Well,
I have so much going on, and it's hard to maintain this.
What we're looking for when we're trying to replace police is we're not looking for a high-intensity activist group of people. We're looking for maintenance, right? People just be there and just show up and do a basic service. You can just go to work today, punch in, punch out, And what we're doing right now is because we're the radicals trying to create a new world. It's just in constant mode, in constant work mode, never shut up on Facebook. Everyone in our family defriends us because they can't take our posts anymore. Just nonstop. And then no money, right? Getting very little money out of this whole thing, if any, and just constantly putting yourself at risk, being that first one to get arrested for something that later people won't get arrested for. It's just people burn out, and I don't blame them.
I'm not getting burnt out by Cop Block.
It fuels the fire in your crazy head.
I've had some serious personal issues. We're talking 2 months straight, and people that know me personally have known what I've been through, specifically this week too. And now that the victory has happened, I can go ahead and start focusing back onto the Cop Block activism. But as far as getting burned out, I actually enjoyed going through all those personal stuff. I enjoyed coming to the CAC and scrubbing the paint off the floors for 2 hours and cleaning out the top floor. It took me 3 hours. 6 bags of trash got taken out. I mean, that was kind of like therapy for me, but that's just, my personality. But I'm looking at these videos and I'm seeing a huge amount of presence at these 420 rallies, and we're going back 4 or 5 years. I'm seeing huge presence with protests and jury nullification outreach and don't take a plea outreach, and I'm a newborn and I'm looking out from the outside in. I'm seeing one or two people at the court now doing that. Guys, and it's the same people every single day.
It's occurring to me that we're nearing the end of our allotted time, and I see that we have people lining up to ask questions. We want to open it up for them.
Yeah, go for it. What's up?
Let me adjust that. There's been a little talk about alternatives. So we talked a little bit about the I'm Getting Arrested app, which I use. There's the Peacekeeper app out there. There's Community Watch that's a big thing, and I know the Oath Keepers are promoting that. And to some extent, there's militias. There's alternatives to keeping the peace. Any ideas about what we can better do to promote those alternatives, real alternatives to police? And is that a role, or can it be, or should it be a role of Cop Block to promote these other alternatives?
I know as far as Peacekeeper goes, I think that's currently my favorite project that's out there, and I hope it maintains. We talked to the creator of it probably, almost a year ago now. He's put in 20 grand of his own money to get this thing going. It's gone a lot farther since then, and I know it shows up on the Cop Block feed probably at least once a week at this point, getting a couple 100,000 reach. So I think that's the one that I like the most because it's not specifically towards police as well. It covers fire and medical emergencies, and I think there's one other abduction. Yeah. So I think those are. I think that's my favorite idea now. For those who don't know, Peacekeeper is basically an app where it's a quick one hit. You load a contact list, and you have separate contact lists depending on the emergency. So if it's a medical emergency, you don't really need to contact these 3 people who know nothing. You might want your nurse friends or your doctor friends, and if it's say a police emergency, you might want those other 3 guys because the doctors aren't going to do crap for you. I think that's my favorite one right now. Obviously, it still has a ways to go for mass acceptance, but I think the concept, whether it's Peacekeeper that wins out or some other one swoops in, and as long as the concept's there, I think that's probably the way that we're going to start moving away from needing to call these services.
Yeah, now back to the sort of original question of like how there's these things here, how do we, or what role we should do. I personally believe, who here uses Peacekeeper? And we're the hardcore elite of the activist world.
I know, that's the problem.
That's right there, that's the answer to the question. This is what needs to happen. We all need to get on some sort of alternative. We all need to get on board and start doing it now.
To back each other up.
And never shut up about it either. Just, I'm friends and family. Have you, look, this is so great. I just hit this and this happens here. I'll set you up, Grandma. And just whatever you do, just be relentless about the promotion, and then it catches on. It doesn't catch on just because it's sitting out there in the interweb just long enough, and then all of a sudden, and then mass adoption. It just doesn't happen.
Right.
You have to actually get on board and actively promote it. And I don't know if that's a specifically Cop Block as an organization kind of thing, but that's definitely should be an individual mission for everyone in this room.
Well, I think that's still the standard. Adoption model. You have the beta adopters, and then you have the early adopters, and then you finally have the normal mass adopters.
Well, like with Bitcoin, that's finally getting a little bit more mainstream in some ways. It only happened because there was these crazies that just crazy about it,
right,
and just wouldn't shut up about it until finally just people caved in, and then enough people caved in, and eventually, now we're getting places, and that the same thing needs to happen.
Right. Well, of course, with Bitcoin, you could use it on a daily basis. Like Peacekeeper, you're probably only going to use once or twice a year, if that. You're not going to have some sort of, your house isn't going to burn down once a year, that type of thing, and you're probably not going to have a medical emergency once a year. So you could go years without actually using it, but being on somebody's contact list, then it ups the chances of you at least being involved and helping one of your friends or family in the future.
I would personally take a little bit of a different angle on it. While I personally am excited to see these technology alternatives and stuff popping up, but I'm really excited to see people using them. I think ultimately, as long as a police force is available, that the majority of people are always going to accept it and endorse it and that sort of thing. I think that it's good to be experimenting with these alternatives, and of course, here in Keene we have the radios, we have Keene 411, and we'll all respond to each other. But as long as the police are going to insist upon a monopoly and are going to violently enforce their monopoly, that people generally will always go towards it. And I think that once the police cease to be an option, that the market will figure it out, and then you'll have actual viable alternatives to police forces.
Of course, as we grow our community here in New Hampshire, then at least the disputes among ourselves will be outside of that system, and we won't be feeding it in.
True. Exactly.
So that's one thing. Is at least as those of us who agree on this topic, stop using it, at least amongst ourselves. Then
exactly.
Well, we're not going to be using Peacekeeper against each other very frequently either. Right. I imagine.
Right. I think we got another question.
Yes.
Grow taller.
I know. Excuse me while I have a short person moment. I have to apologize. You know what? Give me that. Okay. So, you guys talked about the Pumpkinfest riots. I was actually planning on going and doing some independence outreach that day and ended up missing it. And actually, I'm really grateful I missed it because I would have been really scared. It sounds terrifying. And I know that the Free State Project people were not involved. And but my question is, you talk about how there were a bunch of individuals flipping over cars and causing havoc, and a lot of people would say in return to that thank goodness the police were there. Now, what would you say would have been the free market solution, would have been the way that independent people would have handled it if there hadn't been the police there?
I can answer that because I watched the thing unfold before my eyes, and this is my opinion. And these guys might have a different opinion when they were there. There was 45 kids having a little bonfire shooting off little firecrackers. There was this one girl heckling a cop. He jumps up on the porch, grabs her by the hair, drags her all the way in the middle of the street, and all of a sudden there's 50, 60 kids all pissed off. That's where it started. I'm almost certain that's exactly what happened, because the aggression of the cops, they started getting ticked off, and it all started from there, and just every bit of anger these kids had, all of them went just haywire after that. The alternative would be, don't approach them with aggression. And it would have just ended up being a little bonfire, $100 fine, or whatever the city ordinance was, whatever. I think it would have ended there. But they had to come in full force, start gearing up before things even happened.
Yeah, it would seem to me that there was a pre-planned effort to stop rowdy parties at
before
KSC.
The riots. They were geared up. They had their stuff on already before anything happened.
So the situation that you have, I mean, whenever the police get involved, the police will escalate force as far as they have to come out on top of any conflict, and that includes tear gas, that includes armored personnel carriers, and ultimately gunning people down. And that's what turns a rowdy party into a riot. If you have a situation, I mean, I do think that the beginning of this situation was a little bit more dangerous than some people have played it up to be. The video that David Crawford had of what happened earlier in the afternoon was, there was a bunch of kids who were throwing bottles at each other in the street. Now, I can understand why people, have a reaction to that and want to go and intervene, but if these guys are drunk and want to throw bottles at each other, I don't see why a market-based protection agency would go and get involved in something like that.
It was two frat houses having a glass bottle fight.
Right. So if they're throwing bottles at each other, presumably everybody who's out in the street in the midst of this melee, wants to be involved in it. And frankly, if people are drunk enough at 2:30 in the afternoon to think it's a great idea to throw bottles at each other, if you leave them alone, they're probably going to pass out. I don't think that their, decision-making process is going to get better over the course of the evening.
I don't smoke green, but all the cops had to do is pass around joints to every single one of them, buy them all pizza, and call it a day.
But I think if the police had allowed them to do that, they'd probably all been injured and just called it a day. What happened was when the police came in to try to break it up, then they started throwing bottles at the police. When the police brought more police there, they started throwing more bottles. More people came out. They saw police brutality. People reacting to the police brutality, and the conflict just escalates. And it gets to a point where, as we said, I mean, people start flipping over cars, and police are bringing in armored personnel carriers, and I personally think that a market-based entity would be like, look, if these idiots want to kill each other, let them, as long as they're not forcing anybody into their bottle fight, let them be dumb, drunk college idiots.
Exactly. And the second thing is, if it is a market solution, they can be fired. You can drop that service if you don't like how they handled it. So
exactly.
Then you can go down that route and threaten to remove your money from that service.
Matt.
Can I chime in on the answer? I also think the owner of the road in question would contract with some security.
Right.
So there was a spillover to innocent bystanders.
So this was on a public street, and so that's also another problem of public property is that who's going to protect the public property, and if it was actually a private road, then somebody would have a vested interest on keeping it that way, and would have their protection agency to protect their road or all their houses along that.
There is a tragedy of the commons issue there when you talk about the public street, but at the same time, all the houses on that street, to my understanding, it's all college housing. It's all frat houses and stuff like that.
Yeah, but not owned by the college. They're all individually owned by individual landlords.
Right.
So they would probably all have services for protection.
I would imagine that they would, but again, if the people involved in it are sort of engaging in activity that they want to engage in, and people who don't want to engage in it can walk away from it, then again, I don't even see why a private protection agency would involve. It's the same thing. Would they go and they break up like a boxing match or an MMA fight? I don't think that they would. Now, I can understand why some people might have an aversion to that, because you say, hey, these guys are going to kill each other, let's step in and intervene, but their engagement is voluntary.
There's another avenue to this too, that they made a lot of money off these kids the next day. Parcells code enforcement had meter maids help them pass out fines, and they're not just finding one kid for a dirty yard. They're fining every single person in the house $250 a pop for a dirty yard, dirty house. They hit every single house on those 4 streets with fines. We're talking a massive amount of fines. Some of these houses have 17 kids in them. They hit every kid with a dirty lot fine. $250 a pop.
Yeah.
Well, the revenue machine, man, not surprised.
Yeah, now to cap off the whole escalation of force kind of deal, a friend of mine who's lived in New Hampshire his whole life has been to dozens of Pumpkinfests.
I was there last year.
Yeah.
Last year I was there till 3 a.m. and nothing like this happened.
It's always rowdy. There's never a riot. It's always rowdy. The only reason the riot happened is because it was deliberately provoked.
I'm serious. I mean, that's a perfect answer to that question. I saw it unfold in front of my face.
Exactly.
The more cops they brought in, the more kids got pissed. The more they geared up, the more things got thrown. The more they arrested, the more cars got smashed, and it was just like more oppression caused more aggression every time. It was
and the police
amazing.
They couldn't put 2 and 2 together.
And I'm never going again.
Exactly. And they couldn't put 2 and 2 together because they aren't trained to. They're trained to escalate force. Now, what I do for a living, I teach martial arts, and one of the big things I do is de-escalation of force. How to just not have a conflict. And if you see the training videos, et cetera, of the Threat Management Center in Detroit, they do exactly the same thing. It's how do we make violence not happen here, and they're really good at it. And it's complete. I mean, and I've had to do it on my own back porch before. I mean, Rob knows.
Well, it's tough. It's tough. It's tough when you're dealing with college kids, because I mean, he witnessed an assault. I got hit like 9 times and didn't respond.
Exactly.
But with someone like me with the mannerisms that I have, I sound like I'm aggressive, but I'm not. I can talk my way out of. I must have talked my way out of like 20 fights. But never got into a fight or have aggressive man, because I totally believe in the NAP. But when it comes to what you're talking about, self-discipline is huge. It's absolutely huge.
Exactly.
Real quick.
So naturally, a large part of this widespread anger with cops is due to the atrocities that they commit. But I think also a large portion of it is due to the system that treats them like the king's men. So for instance, an example from the news recently was Eric Freerock. He was at large for like 48 days, and he was recently captured. I read that there was like over 1,000 people looking for him in the woods near where he allegedly sniped 2 cops, one of whom died. And on the way here this morning on the radio, I heard that the prosecutor in that case is seeking the death penalty. And indeed, the only person on New Hampshire's death row, somebody who allegedly killed a cop. So my question is, do you think that the people who call for these massive manhunts and who call for the maximum penalty in whatever state it happens to be for someone who kills a cop,
it's bias.
Who dares to kill one of the king's men?
It's bias.
But there might be 2 or 3 of them looking if one of us was killed. They might ask for maybe some pissant 20 years, whatever, if one of us was murdered. So my question is, are the prosecutors and the bigwigs who call for these massive manhunts, are they too fucking stupid to realize that probably a big part of why Freerock allegedly sniped in the first place was anger at the system? Are they oblivious to that irony, or are they fully aware of that irony and they just simply don't care and they're evil, or perhaps some combination?
Well, I'm sure they know, and what their response is holding on to the power that they think they have, because they have the monopoly on force to do it, so they can exert their will however they feel like it.
Yeah, one of the big, it's part of the reason it's like this is just the whole criminal code. The incentives are completely perverse. Like, for example, as long as you have fines for anything, you will have some kind of an economic incentive to arrest people and charge them with things that will bring the money in. And also, if your main recourse after fines for people for societal deviance is locking them up and punishing them in some way, you're going to find a system that doesn't care too much about punishing some people, but wants to punish their enemies, right? Now, if you had a system that was more restitution-based or
personal responsibility,
or de-escalation of conflict-based, not punitive. The problem is a punitive system. It's like daddy, right? I'm going to punish you because you're a bad boy and you transgress, and I'm going to show you who's boss. It's that the whole punitive mentality behind law enforcement. That causes a lot of these problems. Just the fact that we have punishments and not restitution or just de-escalations of the actual crime. It's not, well, it's like the crime almost seems okay as long as it's punished. It's like, no, we don't want the crime to begin with.
I don't personally have a problem with a punitive system. I think that, if somebody comes and, punches you in the face, there's a really good reason to, make that person really uncomfortable about that. And so I would say that to the question of, the huge manhunt for the cop killer as opposed to the, hey, we'll issue a bench warrant for the child molester is, yeah, I do think that's a thing that, probably upsets a lot of people who have issues with the police, but I also think that it's being done in response to a public demand. There is a serious, it's not entirely created by government that people have this outrage towards cop killers over somebody who kills a regular person. There's a public demand to say, hey, he killed one of New York's finest, so go and get him, or Pennsylvania's finest, or whatever. It's unfortunately, I think that they are responding to a public demand, and that's why they're doing it. And the other thing that you have, talking about perverse incentives, I mean, whenever you're talking about the state, the pleasure of money is in the spending of it, right? Not the earning of it. So when you talk about a police department, sending thousands of people into the woods to go look for somebody, these guys are all getting paid to do that. And then, like I said, the pleasure of money is in the spending. So for them, it's almost like the expenditure is an earning, right? So they have the incentive to just go waste tons of amounts of money. And if the public gives them an incentive to do that through public demand by calling a cop killer the worst of all criminals, when in all reality, he took out a bad guy, then that's going to continue to happen.
Just as very quick follow-up on the gentleman's, Joel, I believe, on your de-escalation theme. Yep. Basically, it's a comment more. Just I'm wondering out loud if some of these, not even the bureaucrats, but if the cop lovers, has ever occurred to them that just once if they treated a cop slaying like they would treat the slaying of one of us, where it was just maybe a couple, a few personnel, if it ever occurred to them, and they asked for the same penalty, if that would like ease some of this anger with like the Las Vegas shooters, the person was at New Brunswick, and in this case, if that would ever perhaps reduce that, and
a little bit.
It's like it goes over their head. That might
yes, a little bit, but I mean, as Chris pointed out, there's a popular demand because the people far and wide still believe the system to be legitimate in some way, and cops to be protectors in some way, and so if you're
Ferguson, there was a huge public demand, and nothing happened.
There we go. Yeah, I mean, it's systemic in part, and part of the reason it got so entrenched is because there was a lot of years of just, oh, he killed a cop, he's a really bad guy, and then we got to throw the book at him. And then even though attitudes might be different now, there's still the precedent is still there of, oh, we go after cop killers really bad.
Cool. Well, thanks. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for Chris for jumping in at the last minute. And
thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Enjoy the rest of Keenevention.
Peace.
We'd like to invite you to visit freekeene.com. Freekeene.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. Freekeene.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. Freekeene.com.
I should be in Keene, New Hampshire with the Free Staters.